The first fence post cracked with a sharp report, like a rifle shot in the still morning air. The barbed wire sang as it whipped free when I swung the cutters through the bright orange HOA boundary sign that had inexplicably sprouted dead center in my north pasture. On the far side, a dozen residents of Pine Valley Estates stood clustered, armed with clipboards and venti-iced lattes, staring as if I'd just committed murder. "You cannot do that," screeched HOA President Paige Kettlewell, resplendent in a floppy sun hat and pristine designer boots that had clearly never met actual dirt. "This is no the association's common area." I yanked another metal T-post from the earth and flung it aside with a clang. "No," I replied calmly, working my gum. "This is Section 14, Township 9 North, Range 3 East. County records say it's mine." I tipped my chin toward the sheriff's deputy lounging against his cruiser, arms crossed, watching the show. "And the county," I added, "tends to be right about these things." Paige thrust a perfectly manicured finger in my direction. "Who do you think you are? You don't get to override a duly passed HOA resolution." I reached into my back pocket, pulled out a worn leather wallet, flipped it open, and held it high so the gold-embossed seal caught the sun. "Ma'am," I said, almost politely, "I'm the county land commissioner." A stunned hush settled over the group. In the distance, one of my cows let out a long, low moo that sounded suspiciously like laughter. 2 weeks earlier, my life had been gloriously uncomplicated. Monday through Thursday, I sat in the county planning office reviewing surveys and signing plats. Friday, I spent in the field checking rural parcels and rights of way. Weekends belonged to my 80-acre ranch, where I could pretend the rest of humanity had politely vanished. At 41, I could recite zoning ordinances verbatim, but regularly forgot my own birthday. My biggest excitement was when the feed store changed brands of sweet feed without notice. I'd inherited the place outside Cedar Arroyo from my grandparents' generations of open range dotted with mesquite, creosote, grazing cattle, and a creek that only bothered to run 3 months out of 12. Then the developers arrived. 5 years ago, Gothy sliced Pine Valley Estates out of the southern boundary of my spread. Rows of beige stucco homes, Fox Ranch mailboxes, and a Fox rustic entrance sign that whispered "Estates" like it was embarrassed to exist. The subdivision butted right up against my fence line. The approved plat included an entire page acknowledging adjacent agricultural uses and prohibiting the HOA from complaining about the sights, sounds, or smells of an active ranch. I knew every word of it. After all, I'd signed the final plat as deputy land commissioner back then. I kept to myself. My only interactions with the newcomers were the occasional wide-eyed kid asking to pet a cat, which I allowed, or the endless parade of gleaming SUVs using my gravel driveway to turn around, which irritated me, but wasn't worth a fight. Then I met Paige Kettlewell. Paige swept into Pine Valley Estates like she'd been handed a crown. Former corporate brand strategist turned full-time HOA president and self-appointed community visionary, she viewed my ranch less as private property and more as an underutilized lifestyle enhancement. The opening salvo arrived as a letter complaining about my rooster. "Dear adjacent landowner, your rooster's pre-dawn crowing constitutes a nuisance, violating our community's right to quiet enjoyment. Please remove or relocate the bird. Warm regards, Paige Kettlewell, President, Pine Valley Estates, HOA." I slapped a post-it on it that read, "Lol no," and stuck it to the fridge. In hindsight, I should have recognized it as the declaration of war. It was. The real battle began while I was out of town. For the first time in years, I took a full week off, leaving my foreman, Ray, in charge while I flew east to visit my sister. The cattle were fat, the fences solid, the forecast dull. What could go wrong? Answer: an HOA armed with a vision board and zero grasp of surveyed boundaries. On day 3 of my trip, Ray texted, "Boss, you okay with the new fence going up in the north pasture?" I replied, "Why?" He sent back, "Crew out here says they have an easement for a community trail. Fancy black, wrought iron stuff. Lines running 50 yards inside our side. Told him it's your ground. They say the board voted on it." My temple started pounding. "Take pictures," I texted. "Don't interfere." I'll deal with it when I get home. By the time my plane touched down 3 days later, my inbox overflowed with photos. Crews installing decorative metal fencing straight through my grazing land. Orange signs proclaiming future community greenbelt residents only. And to add insult, an official-looking laminated notice on my old barbed wire declaring, "No trespassing livestock beyond this point subject to impoundment." I drove straight from the airport, dust plumbing behind the truck like a battle flag. Seeing it in person made my jaw clench hard enough to ache. They'd annexed a strip roughly the width of a service road, enclosed it with their pretentious fence, laid sod, planted ornamental trees, and erected a tasteful wooden sign, "Pine Valley Estates Nature Walk Residents and Guests Only." Two teenagers in matching neighborhood polo shirts were attaching yet another notice, "No horses, no ATVs, no unauthorized entry." I pulled U and lowered the window. "You boys have a permit for this work?" They exchanged shrugs. "Dunno, sir. HOA told us the greenbelt goes here. Said the rancher doesn't really use the section anyway." This rancher bit back what he wanted to say. Within the hour, I had the recorded plat spread across my kitchen table. There it was, plain as day. My parcel boundary, the subdivision line, the individual lots, none of which matched where they'd built. I also noticed what Paige had apparently missed, the narrow strip the HOA actually owned behind the backyards and the floodway easement bisecting it. Their greenbelt was currently on my deeded ground. Come monsoon season, it would be underwater and eventually knee-deep in lawsuits. The next morning, a crisp white envelope had been wedged into my gate. Notice of Community Standard Enforcement. As the Pine Valley Estates HOA has established a dedicated community trail and greenbelt, livestock access to the newly designated area is prohibited. Any animals found within the fenced zone will be deemed trespassing and subject to animal control removal and associated fees. Furthermore, discharge of firearms within 500 feet of the community greenbelt is prohibited per HOA Resolution 2307. We appreciate your understanding in maintaining safety and enjoyment for all. Warm regards, Paige L. Kettlewell, President, Pine Valley Estates, HOA. I read the letter 3 times, chuckled once, then felt the petty side of me step back to let the professional side take over. Because this wasn't merely ridiculous, it was illegal. I started with the polite approach. I walked into the Pine Valley Clubhouse during posted office hours, folder in hand containing fresh plat maps. Paige sat behind a gleaming, glass-topped desk, flipping through glossy brochures labeled Community Vision 2026. "Hi," I said. "We haven't formally met. I'm your neighbor to the north. You've built a beautiful development here. Also, your new greenbelt is sitting on my ranch." She gave me the tight, practiced smile of someone who views customer service as optional. "Oh, you must be Caleb," I corrected. "Mercer." I spread the county plat map across her desk and traced the boundary with one finger. "This solid line here, that's your subdivision boundary. This one over here, that's where your contractors installed the new fence. That narrow strip in between?" I tapped the gap. "Still my land, still taxable to me, still deeded to me, not HOA common area." Paige glanced at the map the way someone glances at a menu after they've already ordered. "Yes, we're aware of the older lines," she said, "but the board voted to designate that strip as our greenbelt. It's for the community's benefit. You can vote to designate the moon as a pickleball court," I said, patience thinning. "But it doesn't mean you own it." She straightened. "We consulted the developer's representatives. They told us the rancher didn't mind." "He was wrong," I said. "And even if he wasn't, you still need a recorded easement or a purchase agreement. You have neither." Her eyes narrowed. "You know, the tone of your emails to our management company has been quite combative. We're simply trying to enhance everyone's quality of life on my land," I repeated. She folded her hands neatly. "Look, the community needs open space. Your property was just sitting there, unused. The board decided it made more sense as a greenbelt. If you don't like the fence, you can apply for a variance at our next meeting." I let out a short, incredulous laugh. "I don't apply for permission to use land I already own," I said. "You're trespassing. You need to remove the fence, And if we don't? She asked. I slid the maps back into the folder. Then I stop talking to you as your neighbor, I said, and start talking to you in my official capacity. Paige waved a dismissive hand. Honestly, no offense, but what job could you possibly have that would matter here? A phone rang at the reception desk behind us. The HOA manager answered, listened, then straightened like she'd been shocked. Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Mercer is here right now. Yes, ma'am. We'll make the conference room available immediately. She hung up, eyes wide, and leaned toward Paige. That was the county administrator. She says Land Commissioner Mercer needs our full cooperation right away. Paige turned slowly to stare at me. Land, what? I extended my hand. Full title, County Land Use and Records Commissioner, I said. I sign off on plats, easements, and boundary adjustments including yours, for the first time that day. Paige's smile flickered out. 2 hours later, every unauthorized fence post and greenbelt sign had been photographed and cataloged in a formal complaint file. Copies of HOA Resolution 2307 and the Animal Control Threat Letter were stapled to an internal memo, labeled Possible Unlawful Encroachment and Fraudulent Representation of Ownership. The county attorney's office received a copy. So did the sheriff's department. Paige had wanted to play property games. Unfortunately for her, she'd picked the one neighbor whose actual job was saying, "No, you can't do that with land." The next week became a slow-motion collapse of HOA authority. First came the cease and desist order on official county letterhead, addressed to Pine Valley Estates Homeowners Association. Attention, President Paige L. Kettlewell. It read, "You are hereby ordered to immediately cease trespass and unauthorized use of private property belonging to Caleb Mercer, parcel 09143B. Remove all fencing, signage, and improvements from said parcel within 10 days." Attached was a polite but pointed note about false assertions of jurisdiction over firearm discharge and animal seizure on non-HOA property. Paige called an emergency board meeting. She stood at the front of the clubhouse, clutching the letter like it was a scandal sheet about her own life. This, she declared, is government overreach. Our community voted for the Greenbelt. A hand rose in the audience. Did we vote to build it on someone else's land? A man in a ball cap asked. The rancher's land is basically unused, Paige replied, and he never complained before. He was on vacation, another resident pointed out. Kind of hard to complain from another state. I sat in the back row, silent, watching the board. Two retirees who'd joined the HOA for free coffee and a yoga instructor who mainly wanted the pool lights fixed looked distinctly uncomfortable. Did we verify the boundary lines? One board member asked. I spoke with the developer, Paige snapped. He said we had latitude. Latitude to ignore the recorded plat. I finally said, standing. Because the county records say otherwise. She glared at me. You have a conflict of interest here. I disclose my ownership to my staff, I said. They're the ones who opened the encroachment investigation. I recused myself from the enforcement recommendation. But I'm here as the guy you tried to fence out of his own land. Murmurs spread through the room. What happens if the fence stays? Someone asked. I kept my voice level. Best case scenario. You rack up daily fines from the county, and I sue you for trespass. Worst case. Your insurance company discovers you knowingly built on land you don't own and starts asking questions about fraud. The word fraud hit the room like a dropped anvil. A man in a bright golf polo leaned toward his neighbor and muttered, "My wife's a real estate attorney. She's going to lose her mind when I tell her this." Then came the real hammer blow. The county survey crew's official report arrived on Paige's desk the next morning. Findings. HOA fence encroaches 52.4 feet into parcel 09143B Mercer. 2 HOA monument Sigsara position partially within Thekenti right-of-way without required permits. Irrigation lines for HOA landscaping extend Benneth Mercer property line. County engineering had flagged the monument signs as obstructions in the right-of-way, which, in government speak, translates to move them yourselves, or we'll move them and bill you. Suddenly, it wasn't just me they'd irritated. It was the department that stripes roads, cleans culverts, and quietly maintains the sheriff's favorite speed trap stretch. Within days, Paige's formerly confident emails shifted to frantic ones. To the board, the county is threatening substantial fines. To the developer, you assured us we could utilize that strip. The developer, displaying finely honed corporate survival skills, responded promptly. At no time did our representatives authorize construction on non-HOA property. Any such decision rested solely with the elected board. Even her own board began to fracture. Maybe we should just comply, one member suggested. We can always revisit the idea later. Paige dug in deeper. If we back down now, we lose the greenbelt entirely. We have to demonstrate strength. Meanwhile, my second hat, the mildly vindictive private landowner, came off the peg. I drafted a courteous letter of my own. As you are currently occupying my land without permission, please be advised that continued use will incur a daily trespass fee of $500, billed to the association. This is separate from any additional legal remedies I may pursue. Regards, Caleb J. Mercer, property owner and, in that order, County Land Commissioner. The HOA treasurer crunched the numbers and paled. At the next meeting, he whispered, "We can't sustain this. Between county fines and trespass fees, we'll need a special assessment." The room turned quietly, unmistakably hostile. For the first time, Paige was no longer the loudest voice present. Day 11 after the county order arrived, the fence still stood. The county's patience did not. Mid-morning, a sheriff's pickup, a county work crew, and a flatbed roll-off truck converged at the edge of the erstwhile greenbelt. Ray and I were already there, leaning against my ranch truck, coffee in hand. Paige stormed out of the clubhouse, hair flawless, composure anything but. You can't just show up unannounced. The county inspector raised his clipboard. Per Order 24-18, Pine Valley HOA failed to voluntarily remove encroachments by the stated deadline. We are now proceeding with abatement. 2 workers started impact drivers and began dismantling fence panels with the practiced speed of people who'd done this many times before. Residents gathered, phones out, recording. "Is this because of the ranch guy?" one whispered. "Nah," another answered. "This is because of the law." I stayed off to the side, arms folded, silent. In under an hour, half the fence lay in sections on the ground. Every panel, post, and nature walk sign was loaded onto the flatbed. "Where are you taking our property?" Paige demanded. "County impound lot," the inspector replied. "You may reclaim it after payment of removal costs and accrued penalties." "What penalties?" He read from the sheet. "Encroachment fine, of-way obstruction fine, omitted construction fine." The total was substantial. "But that's our members' money," she sputtered. The inspector shrugged, not unkindly. "Then maybe you shouldn't have spent it building on someone else's land." The sweetest moment for the growing crowd of onlookers at least came next. The county attorney, having reviewed Paige's earlier letters claiming authority to ban firearms within 500 feet of the greenbelt, decided a public clarification was in order. The sheriff's deputy stepped forward, cleared his throat, and addressed the gathering loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just to be perfectly clear, the HOA has no jurisdiction over the adjacent ranch or county road. Their purported firearm restriction is unenforceable off HOA property, and they cannot seize livestock that enters land they do not own." A ripple of murmurs. A few stifled chuckles. Somewhere a kid announced, "Far too loud, Mom, is Miss Kettlewell in trouble?" I finally stepped forward. "Folks," I said, keeping my tone calm and even, "I didn't ask for the fence to come down this way. I gave the HOA every reasonable opportunity to correct the mistake themselves." I looked directly at Paige. "But when you build on ground that isn't yours, it stops being a neighbor dispute and becomes a county matter." That night, an email blasted to all residents, due to unforeseen legal expenses related to property boundary clarification. The HOA board is considering a one-time special assessment. Half the neighborhood repealed, all with variations of "clarify this. Why did you fence off the land commissioner's pasture without consulting a lawyer?" The special assessment meeting lasted exactly 14 minutes. Paige introduced the proposal. A homeowner who happened to be an attorney stood, cited the relevant trespass statutes, highlighted the unnecessary liability, and moved for a recall vote and leadership change. Hands shot up like they were hailing rescue. Page was removed as president, stripped of her board seat, and formally censured for exceeding her authority and exposing the association to significant legal risk. The final tally of fines, penalties, and legal fees totaled $87,000. The HOA levied a special assessment of $1,200 per household to cover it. Page stood at the podium, face drained of color, hands trembling, as the votes were read aloud: 38 in favor of removal, 2 against, 1 abstention. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but nothing emerged. Someone in the back began a slow, solitary clap that fizzled into awkward silence. She gathered her papers with unsteady fingers, turned, and walked out of the clubhouse for the last time as president.